everybody. This is Dianne, one half of the Real Housewives of Alaska.
And this is Marnell. Life. Individual results may vary. It's kind of the theme of this movie.
Yeah, I would have to say so. I think that's fair. So we, this week, decided that we are going to talk about Far From the Tree, which is a documentary based on Andrew Solomon's book from 2012 of the same name.
So now watching the documentary is the same as reading the book.
No, it's not. No, it's not, but we'll get into that.
All right.
So I brought this movie to your attention because I had read the book a couple of years after it came out, and just happened to see on a friend's Facebook page the other night when he was talking about another documentary that he'd watched. One of his friends said, "Oh, well, if you loved this documentary, then you need to watch Far From the Tree." And I was like, "What? Far From the Tree? There's a documentary?" Because I loved the book when I read it. So that's why we're doing this particular documentary this week.
So what movie was recommended before this one? What movie did he respond? He responded with this movie.
Right. So the movie that my friend recommended is a movie that apparently was just released on HBO called Transhood.
Okay.
Which I suspect we'll probably watch at some point.
Because I have a documentary recommendation after watching this movie.
Oh. Well, are you going to share it, or is it something you and I are going to talk about offline?
Oh, okay, I'll share it. So this movie kind of deals a little bit nature versus nurture. How can children be so different from their parents, and what does that look like, you know, from the parent side and things like that. There's a really interesting movie called Three Identical Strangers.
Oh, I saw that about
Yes.
triplets who were separated at birth.
Yes.
Yes.
And that isn't even the weird part.
So I was going to say, I don't remember. I mean, I remember that there was more than that, but I don't remember.
So the reason why they were separated at birth is so that they could be studied. There was a whole bunch of twins and triplets that were separated at birth so that they could be studied by this institute on nature versus nurture.
Which is so unethical and so creepy, and that would never happen now, at least not in the U.S.
It was horrible, and it like once people started to uncover this, the people that were the subject of the studies, the families, were horribly traumatized by it. So
why did the parents agree to it? Do you remember? Did they say?
You know, I think in the case of the triplets, it wasn't. They were all given up for adoption, and they were just adopted out to the separate families.
Okay.
They didn't try to keep the siblings together. And
okay.
Like that. So, yeah. And there was an entire other generation. Like there was like a generation, and then like 8 years later, they did it again to kind of see if they could, you know, if it was, you know,
which
maybe
again,
the era
that's just so intensely unethical. I mean, when I did my master's thesis, you had to take a research class prior to that, and I had taken a research class as a part of my bachelor's degree also. But one of the things is you do not experiment on vulnerable populations.
Yeah.
And people under the age of 18 are considered a vulnerable population.
The movie Three Identical Strangers was amazing. I highly recommend it.
Yeah, and wasn't it like a CNN documentary or something like that?
I think it did start out that way. Yeah, that sounds very familiar. I actually went to, we have a local Gold Town Nickelodeon type theater.
Did they have it?
They had it.
Oh,
yeah,
that's cool.
So that's where I saw it.
That's very cool.
But like when I was watching this movie, Far From the Tree, I couldn't help but think of, you know, the three triplets that were raised in different households who had like the same mannerisms and stuff, especially when we get to Trevor, the kid who murdered the child. So,
right.
And his siblings. So, yeah.
All right, so this documentary was made in 2017. It looks like it was released in 2018. We watched it on Amazon Prime.
Mm-hmm.
How did you rate it?
So I didn't rate it as highly as I normally have our documentaries. It wasn't a, knock out of the park like the other ones. I felt this was kind of dry. And so I was kind of curious about the difference between it and the book. And I'm sure we will talk about that because, of course, this was about, more about the writer who wrote the book. And we just sort of touched on the other families. So I kind of found it a little dry. I think maybe if they would have, I don't know, maybe if it had been a little longer and went into more depth, I would have found it, more intriguing. But I gave it a 3.5 Tribes of Real Boys.
Oh, you rated it really low.
I did.
Wow. Well,
but I still watched it twice.
I gave it a 4.5 out of 5 stars, and I said very good, recommended. However, if you're a reader, the book is way better.
Okay. I will bet that it is.
So, in this case, your belief that the movie and the book are the same thing, doesn't count.
No, this is a documentary about the writing of the book, basically.
And one of the things that was really interesting for me, and yes, I know I'm already straying into bycatch, is Andrew Solomon said it in the movie, and he also said it in the interview that I listened to today. He really processed a lot of his feelings around his parents, not when he was writing the book, but when he worked on the documentary.
I can see how doing the documentary would affect you more because I think probably putting on paper was more private and clinical for him.
Well, my recollection, and I'm sorry, I'm cutting you off. I apologize. Okay. And I'm going to tell you now, it's been 6 years since I read the book, but my recollection is that it's not his story at all. It's the story of the families that he talks to.
Okay, but not the same families as that were portrayed in the documentary, correct?
Correct. There was one person who was in the documentary, and it was the woman with achondroplasia. She looked like she was Hispanic. Leone? Yeah, I don't remember.
Leone? Okay.
I don't remember how you say it. The spelling was really weird, and I was like, the spelling doesn't look at all like I'm hearing it when they say her name.
Loini. Yeah.
Anyway, I believe she was the only person who was actually in the book. But again, it's been 6 years since I read the book. So,
wow. Okay.
Yeah. I've got a few numbers. So, the book was published in 2012. I said that. It won the National Book Critics Circle Award for nonfiction. It was on Time's list of best books for the year. It was on the New York Times list of 10 best books for 2012. Boy, I didn't say that very clearly, did I? It's got 4.5 out of 5 stars on Amazon. It is 573,000 in the Kindle store. So it's like, in the top 150,000 downloads. Still, and now we're talking 8 years later. The movie has a 90% per critics on Rotten Tomatoes and a 95% per viewers on Rotten Tomatoes. It was released in 22 theaters for a total of 23 weeks. Its overall gross worldwide was just a little over $166,000, and its estimated DVD, which I'm assuming also includes streaming, is a little over $70,000.
Wow. Yeah, I was looking at Wikipedia, and the list of awards for this book is, as long as my arm.
Right. And I know that you were going to talk a little bit about Andrew Solomon here shortly. I will say that I became aware of his book, The Noonday Demon, which is a book about depression, that he actually wrote in 2001. And that is his memoir. So that's actually his memoir of experiencing depression.
Right.
And that book won the National Book Award in 2001, and it was also a finalist for a Pulitzer Prize. So,
wow.
Yeah, Andrew Solomon is brilliant.
He is. Yeah.
And he's a really great writer. I will have to admit, I haven't read The Noonday Demon. I actually need to put that back on my Kindle and read it now. And I've been rekindled, as it were, in terms of my interest in rereading this and reading The Noonday Demon. So that's probably going to be the next thing that I tackle.
You know, I was kind of interested in The Noonday Demon. I don't think that I will read Far from the Tree, but The Noonday Demon just kind of sounds like it's right up our alley. I kind of want to watch his TED Talk too.
I was going to say, you might look. Yeah. I actually posted his TED Talk about depression on the Real Housewives Facebook page.
Yeah, so he has 4 TED Talks. Love No Matter What, Depression, The Secret We Share, How the Worst Moments in Our Lives Make Us Who We Are, and How Open Borders Make Us Safe.
Oh, that sounds interesting. I haven't read that, or haven't watched that one.
Yeah, 2017 was when he did that one.
Oh, okay. All right, so our writer is obviously Andrew Solomon, and again, you had said to me you were going to pick him as your hero, so we'll talk more about him in a few minutes.
Right.
Our director, so actually when you watch the movie, I didn't realize it. I saw that there was one director, a woman named Rachel Dretzen. I hope I'm saying her name properly. But when I looked on IMDb, there was actually another woman who was credited as a co-director, and her name is Jamila Efron. So both of them have done a lot of work for public television. Rachel worked as a producer and a director on Frontline, which you probably don't watch a lot of Frontline.
No, I haven't.
So Frontline is usually an hour to 2 hours. I want to say it's usually an hour. Sometimes they're a bit longer. And they're kind of topical documentary films. There are some really, really great ones. I can't say I catch it weekly, but I watch them periodically. So when I realized that was her background, it explained a lot more to me. Jamila Efron has worked on The American Experience, which is another PBS series. And then she also worked on a documentary in 2019 about Woodstock, which was, she's got a total of 3 director credits, those 2 movies and this one. But Rachel is much more like the face of this movie in terms of being the director, and she's the person who Andrew Solomon did an interview with back in 2018 that I posted to our Facebook page as well. Rachel has also done a couple of other movies in terms of directing. So she did a documentary called Who Killed Malcolm X. She did a documentary called Hope and Fury, MLK, the Movement, and the Media. And then she's got a documentary in pre-production about the Boeing Max 737 or 737 Max, which is that big Boeing jet that has been grounded because it was caught up in a whole bunch of crashes. Yeah. What I will say very quickly about Rachel Dretzen, and then I'll shut up for a minute and let you talk about Andrew Solomon. She actually approached him after she read the book. She said she read about the book when it was listed, I believe, in the New York Times top 10 for 2012. Went out and bought it and promptly read it twice, and then got a hold of Andrew Solomon and found out that there were several directors who had approached him who wanted to do this as a documentary, and she described it as the beginning of a long courtship. So she had to work with him quite a bit to get him to commit to her as his director.
Huh.
But
And I could see how that could happen because, having such a award-winning career and such a storied life that, he's definitely interesting.
the other thing that was really interesting about the interview with them is that she talked about how she didn't feel like this could be a literal adaptation of the book, which we'll talk about a little bit more. So she really wanted to do something that caught the essence of the book. Apparently, some of the things that were being knocked around were doing each chapter as an installment and doing like a docuseries versus doing just a documentary. And
that I might have actually probably rated higher. It's almost like they just touched enough on something to make it interesting, and then they moved on.
Well, and I thought it was very interesting that you said that, because that was definitely one of the issues that I had with the documentary, is that I have such a fond recollection and deep memory of the book and deep memory of things that were talked about in the book, that were covered in the book, that weren't touched on in the documentary.
Mm-hmm.
That, I think I would have enjoyed it more had they been more true to the book. I mean, I still rated it pretty highly because I love Andrew Solomon and I thought it was really great. And man, that family with the kid with autism just broke my heart.
Oh, I know.
But I do think that I probably would have enjoyed it more if they'd been closer to the book.
Yeah.
All right, so our Housewives heroes, that leads us directly into
Andrew Solomon.
Right.
So, of course, he was the writer of this, like we talked about. He was actually born in Manhattan, and we did see his father and a little bit of his mother, and he talked about his mother dying at his age of I believe 27.
I think you're right. I think that's what I remember.
What I really found interesting is so she had ovarian cancer, and she actually, and it was a family, kind of decision. She had a planned suicide.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Where did you see that?
So that is on Wikipedia.
Oh, interesting.
Solomon described his experience of his family's presence at his mother's planned suicide at the end of a long battle with ovarian cancer. So that comes from an article in the New Yorker, which he has written for.
Right.
He's written for the New York Times, the New Yorker, Art Forum, Travel and Leisure. He is, of course, he's written the books. He's a dual citizen of the U.S. and the U.K., which is where he was married. His education is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
So he received a Bachelor of Arts degree in English from Yale in 1985. He graduated magna cum laude. He earned his master's degree in English from Jesus College in Cambridge in 2013 and was awarded a PhD in psychology from Jesus College, Cambridge, with a thesis on attachment theory. So that kind of plays into the movie, I think, a little bit, because a couple of the mothers touched on, maybe I didn't hold my child enough. Maybe I didn't breastfeed them long enough, So, and I'm sure his mother probably thought along those same lines too when he came out as gay. So, yeah, we talked about A Noonday Demon, and we talked about Far From the Tree and all its accolades. A Noonday Demon really kind of drew me in. It's called The Noonday Demon, an Atlas for Depression. It was published in May 2001. It's been translated into 24 languages. That's amazing.
So really take the time and watch that TED Talk, because he talks about his experience as someone who suffers depression. And that is deep in my heart, and I know that
Right.
you've had your own troubles with it, your own experiences with it as well. And I think we come by it pretty honestly in our family, quite honestly.
Right.
But
And the title of it is A Secret We All Share.
right. And he actually tells a couple of great stories, and I'm going to spoil one for you. He talks about people approaching him after he gives talks about depression. And he was at some weekend-long forum, and after the first day that he spoke, this woman came up to him and she's like, I just really need to talk to somebody. I have depression and I'm kind of ashamed of it, and my husband would never understand it. And I'm taking this particular medication, and I just want to know what your thoughts are. I want to know if you think that's okay.
Eee.
Well, the husband approached him the next day and said, my wife wouldn't think I was a tough guy if she knew this, but I've actually experienced depression and I'm taking a medication. And it turned out that they were hiding the same medication from each other in the same bedroom.
That is insane.
Well, so, you know, what that really said to me, and he kind of jokes about it, he's like, I did suggest that perhaps lack of communication in the marriage needed to be addressed. But, you know, it really, really speaks to me about how we still don't talk about depression. I think we've gotten better about it, but we still don't talk about it. We don't normalize it.
Right. And it's also people understand that it's not something that really can be controlled by the person, but yet we treat it as something that can.
And I would say that I still see memes on Facebook and posts from people, and it makes me really angry, where they're like, you know, they say stupid things like, you just need to get outside and you need to do yoga and you need to eat a gluten-free diet. And it's like, yeah, you know, probably various aspects of all of those things would be helpful. Some of us truly do have a chemical disorder.
Right. And, you know, it's not, you can call into work with, you know, a sore throat, a migraine, things like that, but you can't really call into work with depression. You know, I mean, it's not something that's acceptable in that, you know, I'm having a really bad, like, if I can't give 110% at work, I might as well not be there. But, you know, it's just not acceptable to call in with, you know, I just don't think I can do it today, you know? So, yeah, it's tough. And so that's what kind of interested me, is looking at that he had that TED Talk. And like I said, not a big book reader, but I really am interested in the Noonday Demon.
You know, in all honesty, you can probably find it as an audiobook.
I probably can, and I have a couple of credits, so that's probably what I'll do. So we talk about charities that our heroes are associated with, and oh boy, does he is big in activism and philanthropy. He is on the board of directors with the National Gay and Lesbian Task Force. He's a Patreon of Proud to Be Project. He is, let's see. He is on the board of the Alliance for the Arts, the World Monuments Fund. He supports the education for Romani children. Romani? Am I saying that right?
I think it's Romani.
He's a member of the PEN American Center. He's on the board of directors.
He was the president of that group.
Yes. From 2015 to 2018.
And I'm going to stop you for just a second, because I actually looked that group up. I didn't know much about them. Not saying that I know a lot more about them now, but their description said that they stand at the intersection of literature and human rights to protect the free expression in the to protect free expression in the U.S. and worldwide. So it sounds like it's a group of people who write and do podcasts and things like that, and this is really about protecting free access to writing and literature and podcasting.
Journalism.
Journalism. Yeah.
He's a trustee in the New York Public Library at the Metropolitan Museum. He's on the board of directors of the artist retreats. I'm going to say Yado.
Oh, and they actually
funded
supported
the book.
The Far From the Tree. Yeah.
Yes. He's a fellow at Berkeley College and at Yale University, and he's a member of the New York Institute for the Humanities and the Council of Foreign Relations. So,
and he's also a professor of psychology at Columbia Medical School.
Yes, that is somewhere in his career. He is an amazing, busy, well-educated, just his list of activism and philanthropy is awe-inspiring.
So what's really interesting about his experience with depression is he talks about this fairly early on in that TED Talk, so I'm not ruining anything for, spoiler alert, you who haven't read the book, which, by the way, you can get with an Audible credit. He talks about, like, waking up one day and literally being paralyzed, like, not being able to get out of his bed, and, like, not just in his spirit, but in his body as well. And he called his father and said, "I'm in big trouble. I need some help."
Wow.
And that was how he started his journey to getting treatment for his depression.
It's interesting. You know, we're getting a little ahead of ourselves, but I found his relationship with his family very interesting, in that they never broke off contact or anything. It didn't seem like that. And it's sort of interesting that he was able to call his dad and be like, "I need help."
I got the feeling that he was probably a little closer to his dad than he was his mom, or maybe his relationship with his dad wasn't as difficult as his relationship with his mom.
Yeah.
I don't have anything to base that on. That was just the feeling that I got from listening to him talk about the two of them. I think probably also his relationship with his dad is close because he had his dad in his life for so many more years than he had his mom, and was able to get to a place where he recognized that he had both love and acceptance from his father.
Right. So I did just purchase A Noonday Demon.
Good. Now I'm going to have to catch up and read the book.
Maybe we could revisit the podcast after reading the book.
Oh, there you go.
So he only has one social media account, which of course is Twitter, because that's where all the self-respecting, artists and writers.
Oh my gosh, I'm going to go follow him right now on Twitter while you're talking.
He is at Andrew_Solomon. He was actually, I found it easier to just Google his name, because there are tons of Andrew Solomons on Twitter, and even Andrew_Solomon would not come up with him on Twitter.
I'm looking for him right now. And trying not to get distracted by anything else on my Twitter account. There he is. Thank you for that. I didn't know if I don't always think to look for people on Twitter, and he's definitely someone that I would like to follow, so.
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, other than that, watch the movie and you'll get to know him a little bit more.
And his TED Talks, there are links to a couple of them on our Facebook page.
I think instead of watching Walking Dead, World Beyond, or Fear the Walking Dead tonight, I'll go watch TED Talks.
Why? Did you hear that maybe they weren't so good?
I may have heard that in more than one place.
You got a hot tip from somebody, did you? Well, I picked someone else as my hero, and it is someone who is not featured at all in the documentary, but she's featured in the book, and it was a memory that stuck with me. So, Dianne Klebold, who was one of the Columbine shooters.
Oh,
his
yes.
mom actually is the person that Andrew interviewed for his chapter on children who had committed crimes.
So some of his nonfiction works include The Reckoning, a father of the Sandy Hook killer searches for answers, in the Annals of Psychology.
So he apparently developed quite a friendship with Sue Klebold. I don't know that they still are in regular touch, but when he was working on the book, they spent quite a bit of time together. And that chapter really stuck with me. She actually did a TED Talk in 2016 where she talked about being the parent of one of the Columbine shooters.
Wow.
It's quite good. It's about 16 minutes long. She talks about having that dual experience of having to recognize that there may be someone in her audience who was directly harmed by her son, but also having that experience of being a grieving mother who lost her son to what she calls a suicide. I mean, and in fairness, Eric and Dylan did commit suicide after they committed the murders at Columbine. Her talk is mostly about suicidality being a mental health emergency and depression being a mental health emergency. It's really quite good. She does talk about how she discovered about 2 years prior to the killings at Columbine that her son was suicidal and was cutting.
Wow.
When I rewatched it today, there were 8.7 million views on YouTube.
I was going to say, I think I'm going to go down a TED Talk rabbit hole tonight.
So I just wanted to highlight her real quick, especially for people who might be on the fence about reading the book, because that chapter did stick so deeply with me.
You know, and that's funny that you mentioned that, because the like I said, the work of nonfiction that for me that stuck out was his writing about the father of the Sandy Hook killers. So for some reason, Andrew Solomon has a particular interest in that kind of frame of trauma.
I think I think that's a peripheral thing. I really do think the greater thing is looking at children and parents and looking at those relationships. I honestly think that's the bigger thing for him. But that would be a very interesting read as well.
Yeah.
All right. Well, so Housewives Weekly, I don't have a lot of stuff in the news. But I did think it was really interesting when they were talking with the people who experienced dwarfism at the Little People of America conference. Mm-hmm. When they were talking about that drug to treat achondroplasia, which is the most common form of dwarfism.
Right.
So I looked it up, and there is an article as of September of this year. So the drug has actually completed phase 3 clinical trials. There were 121 kids enrolled in the study, 60 of whom got the drug. And it showed that the kids who got the drug had close to average bone growth.
So I was wondering how that worked, because my thinking was that achondroplasia was something that is just a genetic disorder, it happens in the womb and there's nothing you can do after that. So I was like, is this taken by women who are trying to get pregnant who may carry the achondroplasia gene?
No, so it's actually administered to kids who are diagnosed early on with achondroplasia. And there's this whole concept of this whole genetic theory, which you may or may not know about, and don't be offended if I'm over-explaining, called epigenetics. Have you ever heard that expression?
I don't think so.
It's okay. It's fair. So epigenetics is the concept that you can have a gene and it can be turned on or turned off. And
okay.
Depending on whether the gene is turned on or turned off, you'll have different results.
Right.
So I didn't keep the tab open. Bear with me if I get the information wrong, but I think that actually what this drug does is it switches, somehow or another, it toggles the gene for achondroplasia, and it makes those kids grow normally. So I don't know if it turns the gene off or turns the gene on. I don't remember. But
for those of us who don't have anything near any sort of medical degree, go watch X-Men 2. And they get the cure for mutantism.
Oh my God. Stop.
And it's super highly controversial because is it really a disability? You know, is that a gene you want to turn off or on?
Well, and so we're definitely into bycatch, but when they show the folks who are talking at the conference, one of the women says, I don't consider my dwarfism to be something to be cured. I don't need to be fixed.
Right.
And the people in the group who are talking are generally pretty much against this drug. Now, It was very interesting. Of course, the article that I looked at was very glowy and was like, oh, you know, the manufacturer has applied for licensing. So it sounds like this drug is going to be clinically available pretty soon. And one of the things that they cite in the article, and it was not it was just a summary of the research. It wasn't a research article, but they actually talk about one of the parents who says, I've watched my child have normal growth, and now she can ride a bike with all of her friends, and her growth has been completely normal.
Yeah, and I think we'll get into that the more we talk about the show, is that a lot of these things, they used to be considered disabilities because you weren't quote-unquote normal. But at this point, what is normal? And is it really a disability, or is it just a different ability? I
think that is so fraught, and I don't think that either one. I mean, and we're way off track now.
We're not going to come up with any answers, but I think,
I really think that, I mean, you have experienced a certain degree of disability with your asthma. We've both experienced a certain degree of disability with depression. But, you know, neither of us has ever experienced anything like the degree of disability that the kiddo with autism has, or the degree of disability that Joe, the fellow with achondroplasia, who is
in the wheelchair,
brilliant.
Yeah. And funny.
You know, neither of us has ever experienced that. So I don't know. I mean,
and I think the toughest part about it is the treatments that you would take to quote unquote cure these things are something that has to be taken before adulthood. And I kind of don't think you really can make any sound decisions about what is and isn't right for somebody, you know, who is a minor.
And you know, I mean, that's so completely variable depending on what condition we're talking about. Like, absolutely, the stuff for treating achondroplasia, up until this drug came along, the only other option was basically surgical bone lengthening.
Yep, which, I've seen documentaries on that.
Right, and so, you know, obviously a child is not going to be making decisions about that. Obviously a child is not going to be making decisions about whether or not they get this drug. Parents are going to be making that decision. Someone who's got a mental illness, for the most part, is going to be making a decision about whether or not they take treatment. So they're going to be making those decisions as an adult. And, you know, we don't have treatments for several of the other things that they touch on, like autism, like Trevor, the kid who was a murderer, a convicted murderer. I mean, they don't even know what went sideways in his brain.
Yeah.
You know, so it's...
Well, and I mean, you really can't, there's a vast gray area about making decisions about your body, you know, when you're a minor. But there's also the factor of, like, Leah, you know, she's having a quote unquote average height child now.
Right.
And she was actually kind of hoping for a child with dwarfism. And it's one of those things where, you know, maybe that child didn't want to be a dwarf. So should you have given the medication?
So that's one of the things that Andrew talks about in the book that I don't think they touched on at any great length in the movie, is he talks about how many of these conditions, for lack of a better word, are conditions that the child experiences, but they're not conditions that the parent experiences. It's not something that's passed on.
Right.
So, for example, someone who's gay, they're generally born to straight parents. Someone who's deaf often is born to hearing parents. His chapter about the deaf community in the book, which they don't touch on the deaf community at all, I was really disappointed, was phenomenal, because the discussion in the book about whether or not to use hearing aids, whether or not to have cochlear implants.
I was wondering, one of the things that he's known to write about is deaf politics.
So he actually started this book as a result of studying and writing about the deaf community. And one of the things, so Nick, my ex's aunt, he had an aunt who was deaf, and she had cochlear implants, but they didn't work very well. And I remembered thinking about her a lot when I was reading the chapter about the deaf community, because there were a lot of people who got cochlear implants and then decided not to use them. They felt their experience was better, their lives were fuller as a fully integrated deaf person, as opposed to someone who was trying to be a hearing person. I would encourage you, if you have a couple of book credits to spend on Audible, do get this book and listen to it on Audible as well, because there were so many things that were touched on in the book that they did not have time to explore in the way that they chose to do this movie.
I might have to do that, since I'm burned out on politics books.
So a couple more things in Housewives, and then we can go on. I did find a very recent article from October of 2020 about the Satanic Temple. It was mostly an interview with Lucien Greaves. Come to find out that his scarring is actually from a childhood accident. So the traumatic cataract, the scarring around the eye, they are from a childhood accident. It was really great. It was an interview that he gave right before the election. And he talked a little bit about how the Satanic Temple has grown so fast, and talked about, we're not Satanists. If you're looking to be a Satanist, if you're looking to worship the devil, look elsewhere, which they say right on their website. They have 200,000 members, and it is now considered the fastest growing religion in the United States.
That's amazing. I love it.
So it was a great article. I should repost it. I should go back.
Or
I should go back and post it. Yeah. Just very quickly, I wanted to give people a little COVID update as we're headed into Thanksgiving. So I looked at the numbers right before we got online. There are nearly 59 million cases worldwide, with 1.4 million deaths worldwide as of tonight. There are over 12 million cases in the United States. 3 million of those cases have occurred since the beginning of November. So we have seen this huge exponential rise in cases. And as of tonight, we have a little over 250,000 deaths in the United States. And as we're headed into Thanksgiving with people making bad choices and traveling and having big family gatherings, sorry, I'm judging, we're 2 weeks from now, we're going to be in hell.
Yep.
I looked at footage from an Arizona airport that a friend of mine on Facebook posted. People are cheek to jowl, no social distancing, and complaining about not being able to social distance. And it's like, dude, you're the one who's traveling.
We still have outbreaks that can be directly traced back to the Sturgis motorcycle rally in May, June, something like that?
It was this summer. I don't know exactly when this summer, because I don't own a Harley and don't pay that much of attention to Sturgis until there are pandemics. So,
but yeah, I mean, so imagine like what it's going to be like 4 months from now. We're still going to be dealing with outbreaks because of what we are doing right now.
And there is a fair possibility. So I believe the Pfizer vaccine is the first one that is up for emergency use authorization with the FDA, and it is supposed to get a hearing on December 10th. There is reasonable possibility that we may be looking at starting vaccinations right after that. Now, do I think we're going to start them on December 11th, like our current Secretary of Health and Human Services says? I don't, because all of the states are going to have to go through their own process for approving these vaccines, and all of these different medical bodies are going to have to say yes or no, which vaccine, do they agree? So it's going to take more. It's going to take longer than that.
Well, and the manufacturing, distribution,
Right.
Inoculation of the public, and then the amount of people who aren't going to take it, not just because they don't get the flu shot, and they don't get that, but there's a lot of people out there who have a distrust right now, whether it's with the pharmaceutical companies or the government or both, or whatever administration is in charge at any point in time. There's going to be a lot of people out there who distrust the vaccine. And
I was listening to an interview tonight, and the doc who was being interviewed said that we need to get 65 to 70% of the population vaccinated for it to be truly effective.
Yeah.
I'm concerned. I mean, you work in public health in Alaska. You know that our vaccination numbers here are really bad.
Yep.
And I'm concerned that nationwide, we're not going to see 65 to 70% of our population choosing to be vaccinated.
Nope.
I'm on the front line. I'm probably not like right at the front of the line for getting vaccinated because I am not in the emergency room. I'm not in the ICU. But our medical director made it pretty clear that we were going to be expected to be vaccinated in order to continue to work at our current place of employment. I'm okay with that.
Well, and that also makes me wonder about, are they going to require it to go back to school?
So right now, and this goes back to news that I heard today, to that same interview. So currently they have authorized one of the vaccines, and I'm not sure if it's the Pfizer one or the Moderna one, down to kids as young as 14. But they do not have a vaccine for kids younger than that. So they're not going to be able to require it for elementary school kids.
Yeah.
And it's going to take a lot more research. And it's because, again, you're dealing with a vulnerable population.
I was going to say, on the opposite end of the spectrum, you have people over 65.
Well, so, elders, generally speaking, are not considered a vulnerable population in research unless they have something else going on, like dementia, that makes them dependent. But kids under the age of 18, by virtue of their age alone, are considered to be a vulnerable population in research. So I think that getting a pediatric vaccine out there is going to take a lot more time.
Yeah.
So,
Gird your loins.
I will say that the CDC updated their website as of Friday with new considerations for whether or not you should have that big family gathering and whether or not you should travel. And so I would encourage anybody who is hearing this before Thanksgiving to take a look at the CDC website if you have any doubts about whether or not you should get together with family or travel.
Yeah, because, I lost my father this year, and my mother is a vulnerable person in the population. I would love to go up and visit my family, but it's also like, I would also like to visit them next year. So, let's make sure they're around next year.
So, Phil did suggest that you could just come up and quarantine at my place for 2 weeks. But anyway, I will say that I have seen a couple of circumstances where I'm like, yeah, go ahead and get together with family. I had a friend who posted that she and her spouse had locked down for a full 2 weeks, like fully locked down. so they could spend time with her elderly father. And I was like, you did what's recommended.
I was going to say, if you can take the precautions, and it's one of those where you might not have the ability to see them next year.
And then I actually spoke with someone recently, an elderly person who had a COVID infection within the past couple of months, as did her husband. And they are gathering with their family. And I was like, there aren't many people to whom I would say go ahead, but you've had an infection in the last 3 months. To the best of our knowledge, you probably have some pretty good immunity at this point.
Right.
If anybody is in a position where they can gather with family, you're one of those people.
Yeah. Yeah, because
those people are few and far between.
Right. There is talk about the ability for reinfection, but 3 months is a pretty short enough time span that I think you might be good.
So the initial research that was coming out said that we thought that antibodies started to wane after about 3 months. I did see an article this past week that indicated that they're thinking that you may have immunity for up to 6 months. But that's one article. It sounds like it was pretty robust. It sounds like there were good numbers to support the research that was done. But, that was news as of last week.
Okay.
All right. Anything for the weekly or anything for housekeeping?
Nope. I don't really have that much.
So I do want to say that I just finished a book that was completely unrelated to the podcast. It was a book called The Huntress by a woman named Kate Quinn. It was really good. It was fiction set right after World War II. I don't want to give a lot away, but there's an element of Nazi hunting. There's an element of coming of age. There's a little bit of romance. It was really, really a good novel. I enjoyed it. So if you're looking for a ripping read that is not highly political, that is a great, just a great story, I would recommend that book.
Okay, well, if we're doing recommendations...
This is Housewives Housekeeping. You can say whatever you want.
So this weekend, like any true 90s kid, I started binging the new Animaniacs episodes. But I got you can only take so much as an adult, I guess. So we started season 2 of The Alienist. I spent all day binge watching The Great on Hulu, which is a mostly fictionalized story about Catherine the Great, the Empress of Russia.
Oh, I actually heard that was really good.
It is so good. I loved it. I really hope they get around to making this season 2. They planned on it, but you never know with COVID.
Right.
And also on Hulu, it's you have to watch it week by week. Unfortunately, it's not all out there yet. The first episode has aired. It's called Big Sky. It was shocking. It's a private detective teams up with an ex-cop to solve the kidnapping cases in Montana. And I tell you what, I did not see the end of the episode coming. And that's saying a lot for someone who tends to watch a lot of crime dramas. So, yeah.
Alrighty.
It's Big Sky. It's amazing. I think if you watch one show week to week, besides anything in The Walking Dead, I would definitely recommend Big Sky.
Huh.
Yeah.
I may have to look at it these next couple of weeks while I'm off and still cooped up because I'm still waiting for my COVID test results.
I'll send you a trailer.
Okay. Sounds good. All right. I think that takes us into our summer, winter, and road construction. And I think I've gone first the last couple of times. So
okay, I was going to say, since you rated it so highly, why don't I go first?
Sounds good.
So my summer, my good, was Andrew's Story. I really, really loved, like I said, he never completely disconnected from his parents. And his journey went from somebody who was tortured about his sexuality and the fact that, you know, he was raised to believe that having a family is everything. And since he can never have that, he's never going to have a great life. And to see him with his extended family in the end.
Oh, especially with his two kids that are like his kids.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, and to hear how they're all interconnected. It was six parents with 4 children in 3 states.
Yes,
you know? And
that was
like,
wonderful.
Our lesbian friends from here, and, you know, they surrogated for us, and then my partner had, and I was just like, that's amazing. And they're all there for Christmas, and, you know, his father speaking at his wedding, and just, I mean, that, like, for the hell that he went through early on in life, I mean, the man is amazing. I just, like, his story brings tears to my eyes right now. So, like, it's just amazing, and it gives you a lot of hope for the future and for, you know, people in general. You know, it can get better. So I really loved Andrew's story. I'm glad that they put it in the movie, since you said it really wasn't in the book.
And I'm going to retract that a little bit, because now that I'm thinking about it, he did, I'm pretty sure, talk about his experience seeking sexual surrogates in the book, because that was not news to me when I watched that in the documentary today.
But seeing in the documentary his father and then his extended family, you know, that was so gratifying, you know.
Yeah, no, I'm just thinking about, he must have talked about it more in the book than I thought that he didn't, than I recollected that he did, because I distinctly remember the whole thing about him, basically, that was a form of therapy to try to become straight.
And what's funny is, like, I actually didn't find that shocking at all. I was actually shocked to, like, his parents didn't put him through conversion therapy, or he didn't put himself through conversion therapy.
I get the sense that even though his parents were not accepting, that they were pretty liberal. So I don't think that they would, I didn't get the sense that they would have done that.
Yeah.
But, you know, I don't know.
You could say the surrogacy was a form of conversion therapy, but I'm talking about the brutal, you know.
No, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
You're talking about, like, holy roller hauled off to some camp in Utah.
Beat the devil out of you.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was my good.
Well, my good was Joe and Leah, the couple with achondroplasia. Mm-hmm. And it was really 2 things. So the discovery at the end of the documentary that they're pregnant, and then the fact that we see Hazel at the very end, that we see their baby, was just so touching.
Yeah.
And then also Joe, he was fascinating. So he actually is an assistant professor of philosophy at San Diego University.
I was wondering, they kind of touched on his education and his job at the family dinner, and his parents were like, it goes way over our head.
They talked about it in one of the reviews of the documentary that I read. So that was how I found that little tidbit.
So we started off the movie with him, mm-hmm. and somebody said to him one time that if they were in his position, they probably would have killed themselves by now. And I'm stunned, but I am not shocked, because people are awful.
So I immediately wrote, cruel. We are so cruel.
I'm just like, see, I look at the guy, and of course I wouldn't see this if he were just by himself on the street, but
right,
I look
because
at the guy,
we don't see his story. We see a guy with a disabling medical condition in our brains.
Right.
In a wheelchair.
I'm like, he's getting around just fine, and like getting to know him, he has a wife and a baby and an education and a career and a very loving family. And I'm like, that's a lot of things a lot of people don't have. He's like, his life's okay. Yeah, he has some disability. Like, I'm 5 foot. Trust me, like, not being able to reach stuff is a super big inconvenience. But you find a way around it. They like I paused it on their kitchen. I loved their kitchen.
Oh.
They were not using the stove or the oven or anything. They actually had like a coffee table that they had a cooktop on, and like a whole bunch of like, they basically kind of made their own kitchen, like on the outer edges of their other kitchen. And I was just like, you find a way around. Like, they don't see themselves disabled, because in their world they're not. In our world, like, elevator buttons are way too high. I loved that Leah took her flip-flop off to turn the lamp on. I've so been there.
So, the person who wrote the review that I read, where they talked a little bit more about Joe especially, said that I think it was a man who was writing it, that he recognized that his language was ableist and making a lot of assumptions about Joe even when he was writing, because I mean, Joe's actually got this incredibly full life that none of us understand.
No, yeah.
Although I will say the one thing that I did look at, especially when I was looking at how severe his achondroplasia as compared to his wife's, was just the medical issues that can go along with that. That's the one place where I was kind of on the, well, maybe that gene therapy isn't so horrible after all, and that's the insidious part of that kind of thinking, is that you can really get kind of swayed into, well, maybe it's not such a bad idea because there's so many other things that we could prevent. But, maybe Joe wouldn't be the person that he is and have that rich life.
Right.
If he'd just been an average dude.
Right. And I find the other insidious part about it is, where do we stop? Like, okay, we can cure achondroplasia. We can cure autism. We can cure Down syndrome. We can cure being gay.
Right. I mean, I think there are a lot of great science fiction novels that have been written with exactly that question in mind. Where do we stop?
Where do we stop? Yeah. And so it becomes icky.
And it becomes the stuff for, to a certain degree, medical ethicists. And I don't envy them making those decisions. How do you counsel a family about whether or not they should do that achondroplasia therapy?
Yeah.
I don't know. I
don't know either.
I, on one hand, from a purely medical perspective, can say, boy, that person's quality of life could be so enhanced, blah, blah, blah. And then I think about that woman saying, and maybe it was Leah. It was
Leah, yeah.
I think about her saying, I'm not something to be fixed.
Yeah.
There is nothing wrong with me.
Yeah. But she is one person in, all of those people, and maybe other people feel differently. Maybe other people are like, my life would have been better and I wish I would have gotten the opportunity, And
I would have to say, honestly, the kid who in the whole documentary, the kid who really made me think that was the kid with autism. Because he's so trapped inside of his body.
Yeah. I mean, just even the ability to communicate would have, I think, probably would improve his quality of life. Communicate better, because they did develop a way to communicate, which I think enhanced his quality of life greatly. Looking at him as a child to a teenager. Yeah.
And we're totally in bycatch again here, but that moment where they have that realization and he is able to actually say, I'm trying and I'm really smart.
Mm-hmm.
And the mom's immediate reaction is, oh my God, he's in there.
Yeah.
That was profound.
Yeah, that I got a little misty-eyed at that one too.
That was very profound.
So kind of on the opposite spectrum, my bad was Jason's mom. So Jason was the kid with Down syndrome.
Which, let me tell you, his obsession with Frozen was heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Just because he seemed like he was doing so great when he was a little kid, and then suddenly his inability to distinguish between reality and not reality.
So my bad was actually his mother in that, like, when I find it just amazingly admirable that, like, when she was told to put her child in an institution before she developed an attachment to him, she's like, no way.
Right. There already is an attachment. Hello.
For the time period, you know, because he's about my age, or he was, you know, when this was filmed, that, you know, that's an amazing thing. I mean, they were still putting people with disabilities in institutions back then. And for her to basically have spent her life, and her husband to have spent his life, you know, basically dedicating their life to their child, and, you know, having that pay off so fruitfully. I mean, to have done everything that they did, travel around and do all of the lectures, and, you know, Jason makes all of the appearances and everything. But then later in life, when she was like letting go of a dream, when I realized Jason was going to be who he is, she was so disappointed that he really just turned out to be an average guy, you know? I mean...
Well, I think that he was so highly functional as a kid, and so much more functional than they had been led to believe that he would ever be.
Right.
That she expected his trajectory to continue that way.
Yeah.
I'm not excusing it, and but I can understand her disappointment.
Yeah.
I actually wondered if he didn't have a little bit of... I mean, I think he probably had a horrible depression, and maybe even a little bit of a break when his dad died.
When his dad died, exactly.
Because that seemed like that was when he also lost the ability to distinguish between reality and fantasy.
Yeah, and his mother made the kind of association that I didn't when they were at that Christmas party where they were talking about distinguishing between reality and fantasy. And she's like, you know, it's completely understandable that you have latched on to somebody who won't ever leave you.
Right.
And she was kind of dealing with her own mortality, in that she, you know, was like, I've made preparations for, you know, a co-helper, and, you know, things like that. And so I get it, but I was just, it made me so sad to basically see her disappointment in her child turning out to be average. You know, she kind of expected him to carry on as a celebrity and to be, you know...
I don't think she expected him to carry on as a celebrity, but I think that she expected his trajectory to be more than it turned out to be.
Yeah, I'm just like, you know what? He's been at the same job for over a decade.
Which is more than most of us can say.
Right. He's got two really good friends. Like, for all intents and purposes, he's kind of an average middle-aged guy. The only difference is he's probably never had a relationship with a woman. He's probably never had a relationship. I won't assume anything.
Except with Elsa.
Except with Elsa. But that's not entirely out of the question. There are plenty of people with Downs who, you know, have relationships. So... you know, I kind of feel like, yeah, he kind of got stuck when his dad died, and I don't know. It was really sad.
I will say that I, in fairness to her, I don't know that she ever... I didn't get the feeling that she let on that kind of disappointment to him. I got the feeling from her that she was unfailingly patient and loving and doing her best to redirect him whenever he isn't able to distinguish between reality and fantasy, but I got the feeling that she was consistently loving.
Oh, yeah. I don't doubt that at all. I was so happy with Jason, like, just being himself and living his life, you know, that I was just like, you know, there are a lot worse kids out there to have. And it actually kind of reminded me of the movie that we reviewed, City of Joy, and that at one point, the doctor said, nobody's story here is worse or better than anybody else's. And you have to think that the guy with achondroplasia probably wouldn't want to trade places with the guy with Down syndrome, and the Down syndrome guy wouldn't want to trade places with the autistic guy, and the autistic guy certainly isn't gonna want to trade places with the kid who is in jail for the rest of his life. Like, nobody's story is worse or better.
Well, like, and Jason himself kind of says that at the end of the documentary.
Yeah. So that was my bad. Jason's mom.
Well, my winter, or my bad, was, and we've already talked about it, was my disappointment that we didn't get the breadth of the book. Because I feel like someone who stops at the documentary is missing so much of Andrew's work. And it actually took him 10 years of research to write the book. So I feel like there is so much more for people to discover about Andrew's work with families and families with kids who are different. I really don't want people to stop there. I do have to say that the interview that I listened to with Andrew and the director today helped a lot. It helped a lot to hear her say, you know, we were trying to catch the essence of the book. We decided not to do it as a docuseries. That made it a little more palatable for me.
Yeah. I think I would have preferred the docuseries.
Well, now you're definitely going to have to download the book on Audible.
Yeah, probably. 93 minutes was not long enough for this documentary. I think they could have probably pushed it to 2 hours and got a little into the meat of a few more things.
And seriously, there's so much more that he explores in the book, and so many more circumstances that he explores in the book that they don't even touch on in the film. So what was your road construction, and was it good or bad?
So mine was good. My road construction was good, and it was about Joe.
Okay.
I absolutely love one of the things he said in the beginning. What body you're in has everything to do with your perspective of the world. Mm-hmm. And, I mean, that's exactly what we've been talking about is, you know, these things were seen as a disability before they were understood and before people were able to kind of basically work around them, you know? I mean, children like Jack would have been put into an institution to just, you know, beat his head against a wall and be nonverbal. Mm-hmm. And, you know, same thing most likely with Jason. And, you know, and then you have, they had 4 different doctors or psychologists look at Trevor to see if they could figure out if there was anything wrong in his brain, and so far they haven't come up with anything.
Right,
but,
and I would have to say that that's the only, like, when we look at the families that were talked about in this documentary, that's the only circumstance that you can't really, quote, work around.
Right.
I mean...
But, I mean, if we could scan Trevor's brain and figure out, oh, this thing right here doesn't work, and if we do something to stimulate that thing, we will have no more people who murder for absolutely no, you know, foreseeable reason. You know, if we could cure that, okay. But, you know, watching this, you know, especially watching the people with dwarfism and Jason and Jack, it was like, you know, these things don't have to always be seen as a disability. Sometimes it can vary depending on the degree of your impairment. But I mean, Jack's story was just so inspiring. Like what they did with that kid, you know, and like when they went through all of the things, like he's on a gluten-free diet and he dairy-free,
Right.
and like they probably cut out red dye number 5, and you know, just all of the homeopathic and chiropractors, and like they did sound therapy and all these things. And I did notice that he had a canine companion in the room with him at one appointment. They had 2 other dogs that were smaller, but he had one of the dogs with the harnesses.
A service dog.
Right. And I don't know if that was actually the doctor's or if that was Jack's family's, but they literally tried everything. And I love kind of how they described going into the room with the I don't even know if was she a doctor?
I don't know. I don't know what her credentials were.
Basically developed the form of communication that he uses now. And so, you know, like I said in the beginning of the episode, you know, life is yeah, I can't even remember what I said.
Basically that your experience may vary.
Yes, life, your individual experience may vary. And so, and I wish people understood that more. And I think there'd be a lot more harmony in the world if we did that. If we could all see what the rest of everybody else was kind of dealing with and going through, because not all disabilities can be seen from the outside. So
I don't know if I've ever told you, but our godson, I say our, but you know, but our godson is on the spectrum. And he's high functioning. He's what would have been, and what in some circles is still referred to as Asperger's. Mm-hmm. But I was relating to a lot of what you were just talking about when the family was saying, oh, well, we tried cutting out gluten and we did this and we did that, because I watched my really good friend go through similar stuff with her son.
Yeah. And
he's now in his first semester as a freshman, and he's not doing well.
Is it because of COVID, or?
I think some of it is COVID, and I think some of it is him.
I was going to say, like...
I mean, he really, given his druthers, would much rather hole up and play a video game, and now he's not, you know, they're not doing in-person classes, he is in the dorm, he's holed up, and he's playing video games.
Yeah. So, and that's something else that I think COVID has probably shown us is like our people's different levels of ability. There are some kids that are flourishing learning at home, and then there's a lot of kids who definitely aren't. And it's sort of we have to stop trying to make everyone fit into a square hole or a round hole, or, you know, a square peg into a round hole. If that's your godson, if that's like, maybe he could make a life and a career out of, you know, reviewing video games or creating video games, or, you know, everyone wants their kid to become a doctor or a lawyer or something. And there are, you know, people do great things beyond that with their own ability. So just try to like not make everyone meet your expectations for yourself.
Well, and you know, I will say that his parents have not forced their expectations on him. This decision to go to school and to choose the path of study that he said he wanted to do was his decision.
And man, everyone gets a break this year, because like, I ain't even gonna hold that against you this year. Like,
yeah. All right. Well, my road construction was also a good, and it, you know, once again, it's completely selfish. these last several movies that we've done, they've been completely selfish experiences for me ultimately, which is that I'm able to take some hope away from them.
Yeah.
And the thing that I wrote down underneath this was love and acceptance are two different things. But also the thing that I took away from it, because of course I'm feeling pretty wounded in the process of this divorce right now. And the last 5 years, as you know, have not been easy with all of the different things that have happened in my life.
Mm-hmm.
I'm able to walk away and say, even at our worst, there's still stuff in us that should be loved.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, Trevor's parents were very inspiring for that, in that, you know, their 16-year-old murdered an 8-year-old for pretty much no reason. And, like, his mom talking to him on the phone was just like talking to any other kid, you know? Like, she's his mom. She still loves him. There's still something in there to be loved. He did this horrible thing, but that's something he did. That's not who he is.
Yeah, that was a very hard story.
Yeah. Yep. All right. Are we in bycatch?
I think we are.
Talked all about it.
Well, we've talked about most of it. Yeah, I do. I don't know if there's any other stuff that you want to talk about.
So Jack's mom, when towards the beginning of the episode, before we knew Jack's story, and
I thought, oh my God, is he in an institution? Is he dead? What's going on?
she was basically like, I didn't want this life, you know, and I don't want to say I related to that so much, because like I couldn't handle a regular kid, but I was just like, I love that she's so honest about the fact that she's not like, no, like it was great, our child is different, and she's like, I wanted a kid, I didn't sign up for this, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, he was quote unquote normal for the first 1.5 to 2 years of his life, and they didn't talk about it, and I do not subscribe to this at all, but she wondered about all of the things that she did or didn't do when she was pregnant or whatever. I'm wondering if like she kind of went through that whole did vaccines cause my child to have autism phase.
You know, it sounds like she pretty much beat herself up for everything else. It's highly, highly possible that she beat herself up about that as well. Because
isn't that right around the time that kids do...
It does seem like when kids... It seems like when kids show the greatest regression is about that developmental stage that occurs around the same time that we start vaccines.
Yeah.
Now I say that very cautiously, because I want people to really understand that there have been multiple studies. There is no link between vaccines and autism. Zero, zilch. Andrew Wakefield lost his license to practice medicine in the UK.
You've had vaccines. I've had vaccines. Right. And there's plenty of children out there with autism who did not get vaccines. So, yeah. What's that whole thing about causation and
correlation? Yeah. Causation and correlation, right. Yeah.
So, but I was just like, I loved that little bit of honesty from her when she was just like, I didn't want this, you know, but her and her husband have like, to see Jack and the real boys, you know, his tribe, as they called him, at the end, you know, just hanging out, like from afar, they look like regular teenage boys, you know. You would never know that, you know, anything was different about them. And to go from what he was, you know, slapping and pinching and, you know, just, yeah, to go from his early years to seeing him later in life, and like him sitting still in a classroom, like regular kids can't do that.
So I know I keep referring to it, but that interview with the director and with Andrew Solomon, mm-hmm. she actually says that at one point when they're filming with Jack's family and he's at the orthodontist getting his braces, that he was basically in a physical position where he was very vulnerable because of the way that he was having to lay in the chair to be fitted for his braces. And he told them, I don't want you in here. I'm really uncomfortable. You need to leave. And she said, I was so glad. It made me feel so good that he was able to say that.
Wow. That's amazing. You know, and I didn't catch his name, but the guy who is his facilitator.
Yeah, he was pretty cool. Yeah.
I love that when the kids were like, does he know if he's being filmed? And the guy's like, what do you mean? Like, you've seen him talk all the time in class. He's like, he's really smart. Did you get straight A's last semester? And the kid's like, no, I got a couple B's. And he's like, well, Jack got straight A's. So.
Right.
I was like, you go.
Yeah, no, that his facilitator was great. Yeah. I agree.
Yeah.
I'm going to use one of our favorite words from Biters. So I loved the juxtaposition of the adult Andrew and his incredible voice. I love the way he speaks with these stories of kids. I thought that was just a really neat piece of filmmaking. Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, usually we've talked about this on Biters before, where you'll have an episode of a show where you jump back and forth in time or jump back and forth between stories, and I have a really hard time following, and I actually was okay with it this time. We jumped around kind of quite a bit, and I don't think it bothered the flow of the story at all, and I kind of think that has a lot to do with the way that Andrew's story was threaded through the movie. Yeah. Great storytelling.
It would definitely have been more difficult had they tried to cover everything that was covered in the book, because there are 12 separate chapters in the book.
Wow.
So it would have been 12 different stories.
Yeah. So speaking of mothers that got on my nerves this episode, Lonnie or Leonie's mom. And that hair curling thing.
Oh, that was so funny. That she offered and then complained.
Yeah, like, she offered it, like, she's like, do you want your hair straightened? And she's like, no. And she's like, do you want me to curl it? I can curl it. How about if I curl it? Would you want curls? She's like, stop it. She's 23. She's not a child. And then she winds up curling it and then complaining about it. She's like, ugh, mothers.
I wrote at the top of my next page, and this is a quote from Andrew Solomon, how do we decide what to cure and what to celebrate? And this goes back to what you and I were talking about just a little while ago, you know, which is that I don't think we know.
No, I don't. And I think results may vary. I think it's highly individualized, you know. You know, had Jack been born into any other family, maybe he wouldn't have done as well, and maybe he would have benefited from a cure, you know, or, you know, maybe if, I don't know. And like we said, where does it end? What else do we cure? I mean, I'm only 5 foot. Should I be 5'4"? I mean, I don't, it's an inconvenience, not a disability, you know? And I think probably Leah sees her situation that way, as it's like super inconvenient that I can't reach, you know, beyond 3 shelves at a grocery store, but it's not a disability. So,
yeah. I don't know. I don't have a good answer. I don't have a good answer. I would be really hard pressed as a healthcare provider to offer good counseling to some of these families, because I would be so torn.
You know, I found most of these families to be very well adjusted for their situation, and that is, I think that's everything. I mean, there's a lot of quote unquote neurotypical people that they're not well adjusted. Their families aren't well adjusted, and they're not on any sort of path to be there. Is that a disability? No, it's not. It's, you just, you develop, if you have something in you that didn't develop in a typical way, you develop a different path for yourself.
And again, I think it's really easy to say that when you don't live in those bodies.
Yes, it is. It is. And that's why I have no answers about whether or not we should cure anything like this, because,
And again, I think the only thing where I could really strongly argue, yes, we absolutely should cure it, is the situation that Trevor and his family found themselves in. Yes. Because that was a situation where someone else was harmed, where a child was killed.
Right. And, Jeffrey Dahmer actually donated his body to science so that they could study his brain, because even he was like, I don't know what caused this, and I think it should be studied so that, maybe it could be prevented in somebody else. And they actually did that thing where they do the micrometer scan, they cut the brain and scan it. So yeah, definitely cure that. Cure murderism.
Yeah. Yeah. That's one that is totally different from all of the other situations that we look at, and we agree that should be eradicated.
Yeah, definitely. Do I think it will be? No.
Right.
But that's all that I have.
I think that's all that I have too.
Okay.
I very much enjoyed this. I'm really glad that you willingly went on this journey with me, and I'm glad that you enjoyed Andrew Solomon so much, because I think he's a pretty special human.
Yeah, and so, I mean, I kind of gave this a bit of a low rating, but like I said, I kind of felt that it was on the dry side. I would have liked to have delved into things a little more than they did in the 93 minutes that we had. So I would have maybe liked an episodic or a miniseries or whatever. But yeah, I did go download one of his books. And
well, I'm definitely going to challenge you to download this one too, because I'm going to go back and reread it. And I'm going to read The Noonday Demon, and I really would like to hear from you, both offline and in a future podcast, about what your experiences are with both of those books.
All right.
Besides, you know what we're going to do for our first explicit book review on Biters, so...
Oh, we're going to have some interesting content when
oh my goodness,
takes its extended break.
All right.
I don't know what we're doing next, but I have a feeling we'll probably have a guest, maybe?
I don't know if we're going to be looking at one this weekend, because I think that's awfully short notice for a guest, but we should start talking...
a holiday weekend kind of.
Right. That's fair enough. But I think that we should definitely start talking with our various and sundry podcasters who have said that they would be willing to, and or even like to, come on. Maybe I'll finish up the second season of The Boys this week, because I know that we had talked about possibly talking about that with Phil.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So, yeah, we may take a break next week, maybe?
I don't think so.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's not like we're going anywhere for Thanksgiving or anything.
I keep seeing the meme that says, I'm not really sure what to wear for Thanksgiving. I'm not sure if I'm going to go. Not really sure what to wear out of the bedroom for Thanksgiving. Not really sure if I'm going to go.
I can tell you the stores were still loaded up with ingredients this weekend for Thanksgiving stuff. So it is a much different year than it has been in the past.
So seriously, one of my friends was kind of cursing me for sharing that lemon bar recipe on Facebook. And I was like, yeah, the great thing about being in quarantine and being single for Thanksgiving is I can't justify making a huge pan of lemon bars because I know I will make myself sick eating them all.
Oh, yeah, we're going to try not to do too much because it's just the two of us, so...
I am going to Instant Cart, so, I may honestly look and see if there's, like, some prefab turkey dinner that I can order off of Instant Cart, but...
Usually Safeway, but I don't know if you have Safeway there.
Yeah, we do. I don't usually give them my business, though. I usually stick with Fred Meyer's.
Ah. All right, everybody. Have a happy Thanksgiving.
And...
We will talk to you next week, but until then, you girls watch out for those weirdos.
We are the weirdos, mister.
Have a good week, everyone.
Have a good week. Bye.
Take your pride.